Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we now live in a world where finally, the Avatar sequels, all four of them, have begun production. He's actually rolling film, no more false starts. And they now feature kids. Yes, that's the official publicity angle that Fox has decided to take as they begin production, which I think is a lot more audience-friendly than the unofficial publicity angle that debuted yesterday, in that these four sequels are going to cost Fox a cool $1 billion. That's right, it's going to cost them $1 billion with a B to make all four movies. And they can't even do it in an installment plan because he's shooting them back to back. This is a lump sum payout, which I guess makes a little sense when you think about how the first film alone made almost $3 billion at the box office. And it is still the highest grossing film of all time. But I don't know, I have a hard time believing that Avatar is going to be more than a one-hit wonder. We'll discuss that, but first I want to focus on these kids. Now, as you can see, they've made quite an effort to get a very diverse group of actors. However, all but one of them will be doing motion capture work, and I'm curious to see what the level of quality that these kids can deliver when it comes to motion capture work. It's, it's like working with green screen. It's hard to do, so I'm sure, the odds that a couple of these kids are fabulous at it is quite high, but so are odds that maybe one or two of them is not. We'll see. But on that note, doesn't matter how diverse this group is, they're all going to be hiding behind digital blue paint, which is something that happened with the first Avatar film. I don't really think that James Cameron can get credit for having a diverse cast when they don't show up on screen. And Entertainment Weekly underscored this dilemma when they got it wrong as to which child actor is playing the only one who will actually appear on screen. How do I know this? Well, Fox sent out their own little publicity email which talked about these child actors and labeled them, and I couldn't believe that Entertainment Weekly got it wrong, and I guess that Fox didn't correct it. All right, so Entertainment Weekly said that this kid is playing the only human child born at Hell's Gate on Pandora. And I guess it's understandable because the character's name is Javier, quote-unquote Spider, that's his nickname, Socorro. But it's actually that kid who looks like he's straight out of Central Casting and does not seem particularly like a Javier. I mean, obviously anyone could be a Javier, but if you're going to have someone named Javier Spider Socorro, I think the other kid looks like a better choice. So Entertainment Weekly obviously did too. And just to double check, because this actor's the one who's going to appear on screen, his name is Jack Champion. I looked it up, and it is indeed the other child that Fox labeled. So not a great start in that regard. Now, adding kids to movies is always a mixed bag. Sometimes it goes really well, like with Jurassic Park. In fact, I think in the first Jurassic Park, that is an example of some of the best, if not the best, child characters of all time. In like a blockbuster film, not a film made specifically for family audiences. However, you can stick to the same franchise for examples of horrible use of child characters, where they're forced upon the movie and therefore also audiences. And I'm talking about Jurassic Park 2 and also Jurassic World. So grating with those child characters. Steven Spielberg was involved in all those movies, directing the first two, so even when you have a certain individual, they don't always get it right. And that's, I bring that up because James Cameron, of course, is responsible for one of the most famous child characters or teen characters in movies of all time, and that's, of course, John Connor. He did a great job with him, even though that character, hopefully he can redeem that character because others have really pummeled him into the ground. But still, what Eddie Furlong did in Terminator 2 was spectacular. And of course, James Cameron is responsible for that. Now, why would you add all these kids to the movie, right? I don't know. I mean, I guess they want to expand the child fan base, especially after they opened the theme park in Disney's Animal Kingdom, which was pretty amazing. As I've said, as I tweeted when I went there, it's the best ride I've ever been on, Flights of Passage, where you get to ride a banshee, basically. It's just absolutely amazing. It's an incredible experience. It's like take Soarin' to the next level. It's like a VR Soarin' experience. I was blown away. I didn't think I would want to see another Avatar movie until I rode that ride, and now I'm like, maybe I would. Navi River Rapids, which is just like going in a boat through Pandora, I wasn't too into that. And it reminded me of how many people liked Avatar, though, the first one, because they just wanted to simply go to Pandora. And I think that's what that ride is supposed to, that's the itch it's supposed to scratch. So I guess the real question is, when they go to these sequels, are there still enough people left who are so eager to go to Pandora that that's enough for them to go and see the movie, right? I mean, is this just really a return trip to Pandora and they're going to play up the 3D and maybe have some more, push the edge of the envelope even more? They were talking to one of the producers of the film as they began production, and he's like, it wasn't just a 3D, viewing experience. It's also a great story. And I don't know. I mean, James Cameron has admitted he thought of doing Pocahontas in space. Great pitch, great log line, but I don't really think he did much with that, although it's very clearly what he delivered. So we'll see. I mean, it's over a decade later, with the first one coming out in 2020. I never understood the original Avatar craze, but I also know you should never underestimate James Cameron. He's not only a genius when it comes to technological achievements in film, but he really knows how to get audiences involved in his films emotionally. I mean, the two things that I dislike the most about Titanic and Avatar are their emotional, sappy storylines, but I know that is what really sucked a lot of people in, with all due respect for both those movies, and made them the box office juggernauts that they are. So who knows? Maybe these kids are going to have they're going to give us the feels, and everyone will be really into the Avatar sequels. We'll see. But I'm certainly curious, the most so because I went to Animal Kingdom and had a good time at the theme park. All right, so that's the first. Oh, I wanted to talk about how much, in terms of the investment, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I guess that's what I'll ask you. Do you think you're going to see this film, and do you think you'll see it multiple times? That's the only thing that's going to power these additional Avatar films to the same box office heights that the first one reached. And I think unless he has, no matter what that producer said, unless James Cameron can introduce new technological achievements as well, that creates an even more visceral viewing experience than the first one represented, I just don't. Maybe it can get to the $1 billion club, maybe, but I don't see it getting close to 3 again. I just, unless it has some technological thing as part and parcel. All right, so again, that's the first story of the day, and so I'm curious to how you feel about the sequels in general, and also what do you think of the kid cast, and what do you think of who's the actual kid who will be on screen versus the one that Entertainment Weekly thought would be. Now, speaking of directors with a lot on the line, we have a pair of them for the next story that certainly also find themselves with something to prove, like James Cameron. That's Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who have finally found themselves another live-action gig. We were just talking about how embarrassing it is. They have nothing to follow up after being fired off of the Han Solo movie, but now they do. And they're going to direct Andy Weir's next novel, which hasn't come out yet, called Artemis. And Andy Weir, of course, wrote The Martian, which was a fabulous film, one of my favorite films the year it came out. Although, with all due respect to Andy Weir, I think a lot of the reason that film was so successful is because Drew Goddard did such a fabulous job interpreting his book, and particularly taking a lot of inner monologue and making it an outer monologue for Matt Damon's character. And of course, Matt Damon was perfectly cast. Just really a fabulous pairing of character and actor. So I don't really know if Andy Weir can deliver once again. We'll see how the reviews are once the book comes out. But this is typical. Even though the book isn't out, because Andy Weir is behind The Martian, his book sells to Hollywood before it even comes out and is already taking shape as a movie. And then the publisher will use that to push Artemis, saying, it's the next Phil Lord and Chris Miller movie, you better read it now. So that's how the publishing industry works. And Hollywood. So anyway, this story features a female lead who's a space smuggler living on the moon, and she finds herself in over her head. And a number of people yesterday, when this news was announced, said this sounds a little bit like the Han Solo movie, right? He, of course, is also a smuggler in space. And people felt that maybe Phil Lord and Chris Miller were doing this in a way to kind of get back at Kathleen Kennedy and Disney and Lucasfilm, and saying, we're going to make a competing movie, and when Ron Howard delivers a sucky product to you, and we deliver a fantastic product, everyone's going to say you shouldn't have fired Phil Lord and Chris Miller. But why take that risk, right? What if they don't? What if Ron Howard does a slam dunk and Kathleen Kennedy and Lawrence Kasdan were right all along, and then Phil Lord and Chris Miller don't deliver, and everyone goes, it's a good thing they were fired? Like, why even risk that at all? Especially because I think there's probably a 50% chance it's 50-50 as to which way it's going to go. And also, why make Hollywood feel that you're petty? I think that's you would think Hollywood would be like, just move on, right? I mean, they were recently talking about the head of Paramount having to let J.J. Abrams go so he could go, he has a deal with J.J. Abrams had a deal with Paramount to go and direct a big movie for them. But now he's going back to Disney. And so Paramount's like left holding the bag. And some people said, well, Jim Giannopoulos, who comes from Fox, interestingly enough, is now the head of Paramount, and he could have complained and made a big stink about it and, caused some problems, although he is getting a paycheck from Disney to make up for that potential loss. But he said, it's a business of relationships. It's a small town. Everyone's going to get upset with me within the industry and fandom. So I just have no choice really but to play along. And I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller should have taken the high road as well, because, you just don't want to seem like a petty, vengeful individual. But we'll see. This is apparently very important to them. But I would have cautioned them against taking something with a female lead, because for all the fabulous films that they've made so far, I don't think that they've ever delivered a strong female lead. I actually think they have not, for not even like successfully, but they just haven't had a single female lead character. They've had strong female supporting characters, but I haven't liked them. I think they're a little bit old school G.I. Jane, and not, I think, the more realistic depiction of strong female characters that's all the rage right now, for a good reason, because that's the way it should be done. So I actually don't have a lot of faith in Phil Lord and Chris Miller in doing a good female lead, so hopefully I'm wrong, or hopefully they've learned from their past female characters. But I'm curious, do you think they should have taken this gig? And do you think that they can handle a female lead? Now, for the third story of the day, Leonardo DiCaprio is ready to return to acting. He finally got his Oscar. He was embroiled in a huge scandal in terms of where the money came from for The Wolf of Wall Street, but now he's ready to come back. And of course, for Marty Scorsese, but not for the Joker origin story and not for Warner Brothers. He's going to be returning for Paramount, where his production company, Appian Way, has a deal, a first look deal. So again, as we've discussed before, that means any movie that Leonardo DiCaprio wants to produce himself, he has to take to Paramount and give them the right to, say, yes, we will distribute this, or we will not. You're free to take it somewhere else. So that's good news for Paramount after losing J.J. Abrams, right? So good for them. But anyway, this project is going to be a Teddy Roosevelt biography, which Leonardo DiCaprio has been interested apparently for some time. And they're going to focus not only on his military career, but also, of course, when he became president and was the youngest president, still to this day at 42. He was ushered in because he was vice president, and then McKinley was assassinated. And interestingly, JFK, just 1 year from tying Teddy Roosevelt's record as the youngest person to become president. But what really apparently interests Leonardo DiCaprio is that Teddy Roosevelt's work in preservation, like he's the one responsible for our national parks. But I hope they also include another fun story about Teddy Roosevelt, and that he created, or he is responsible for the creation of the teddy bear. That's where it gets its name, Teddy Roosevelt, the teddy bear. So if you don't know this story, it's a great story. On a hunting trip, they chased down this American black bear. The hounds were at it, and then they finally got it, and then they tied it to a tree, and they were like, Mr. President, you can shoot it now. And he refused because he felt, it was just, it was wrong, it was unsportsmanlike. I mean, he still was a hunter. But, he just, I think particularly when you're considering the time period, for him, back then, that was a step too far. I'm sure, today he would, maybe be, calibrated, a little bit further down the line. But anyway, it was a big deal back then that was his response. And he did say that the bear should be killed to be put out of its misery, which speaks to the shape that it was in when he saw it. But anyway, this became a big political cartoon. And even though it was an adult bear, to sell the cartoon, to really hit home with what Teddy Roosevelt did, they made the bear really adorable in a lot of the cartoons. So a toy maker saw this and asked for Teddy Roosevelt's permission, and Teddy Roosevelt said yes, and he put a cute little adorable bear in his shop window, and he said, this is the teddy bear, and it was a huge seller, and that's where teddy bears came from. So I think that would be a fun thing to include in the movie. Now this is a great fit for Leonardo DiCaprio, who happens to be 42 himself. And although his collaborations with Scorsese are hit and miss, like I thought Wolf of Wall Street, well, I have problems with it. I think it was still, a very strong film. And also I love The Departed. But I think Gangs of New York, The Aviator, and Shutter Island were not so great. So I just worry that maybe there's like a casualness to Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese's collaborations. And I don't know if they're really going to push themselves as much as maybe one would hope, right? Especially because TV is so good right now. I don't want them making just a really lavish HBO movie, so to speak. But I think it's a good fit with the actor with the material. Again, speaking of actor with the material, And I think that Martin Scorsese, you know, obviously DiCaprio feels comfortable with him. So I'm curious, does this sound like a good movie to you? And what do you think of this as DiCaprio's next project? I think it's certainly better than the killer he wants to do from The World's Fair with Scorsese, where he would be playing one of the most gruesome mass murder, serial killers, actually, because it was one at a time, of all, you know, one of the most gruesome serial killers in American history. Don't do it, DiCaprio. It's a bad idea. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Shani Amayev, and Shani has been so patient and persistent. I'm happy to finally answer the question. So Shani says, viewer question, can you smell the circus, Grace? You know, a reference to It. Haha, just kidding. I have a question about inexperienced talent, specifically child actors, like, for example, the cast of It. Most of them are breakout stars with very small acting credits before this movie. I would say pretty much everyone except Jaden Lieberher and Finn Wolfhard. Do you think they got cast solely on their audition? I've heard that no casting director would even glance your way if you hadn't learned at an acting school. But what's the case for teen actors, and what does it take to be a teen actor? How do you think starting out and getting a deal with a talent agency? I watch your videos every day and it would mean a lot to me if you answered, and then lots of nice emojis. Well, I'd like to point out sometimes it's connections. Like, for instance, Jack Dylan Grazer, as we've been discussing in a couple of videos, is the nephew of Brian Grazer. So he already has his industry connections all sewn up. But it's tough to break into acting at any level. It's a little bit easier for kid actors because they just need so many of them, you know, especially for commercials and stuff like that. And also it's a little bit harder to prove credentials at that age, so they're a little bit more open to just taking a look at anyone. When you get to be, you know, teen actors and beyond, it becomes more difficult. So yes, acting school is a great way to get into the business. There are no guarantees, though, when it comes to Hollywood. I think that's very important to keep in mind. And please remember that it's 99% rejection. And often for reasons that have nothing to do with you. You just don't have the right look. Oh, this agent is better friends with the casting director or the producer, etc., etc. It's important that you be prepared for the rejection and that you know not to take it personally. But anyway, if you're going to try and be an actor, you know, acting school is very important. Commercials, particularly at the child and teen level, and that's a very good way to get your foot in the door. But be careful of organizations that recruit you. If someone is aggressively recruiting you and promising you they can get you a big Hollywood career, that person is a liar. A good agent will be difficult to get. So what you want to do is you want to have a headshot. That's very important. And also be careful, again, don't have headshots taken with someone who thinks it's part of a package deal and they're, again, promising you a shortcut to the front of the line. That's actually something Hollywood's clamping down on, you know, acting classes even for adults promising connections. And, you know, the city of Los Angeles, thankfully, is shutting those down. But anyway, you need a headshot and you need a demo reel. You know, you want to keep sending that to agents and you want to invite them to live performances that you might be doing, be it a school showcase, although if you're at a good acting school, they'll invite the agents, or if you're doing local theater, etc. Basically, agents want you to have a bit of a success factor to yourself already. That's what you have to remember. They want you to have either been in some commercials or you've gone to a good acting school that they can name check, right? Because they want an angle to sell you to the casting director. So that's my advice to you. You know, remember that it is a business. Remember, you know, that it's not easy, and if it is easy, that's a giant red flag. And I would also ask, I know some casting directors watch this show, so I would hope that down below maybe you could give some advice as well as to what it takes to get a foot in the door as an actor, particularly from the child perspective and the teen perspective. All right, so Shani, thank you for your patience, and I'm glad I was able to answer your question today. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please write down below today's top 3 stories, Shani's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions, of course, that you might have. Thanks for watching.